Hello everybody, it is me, Dan Phelps, and I'm here to answer a question that somebody asked on a live stream, which is, do you use a compressor? The answer is yes, I use a compressor and I am not ashamed to admit it. I might use it in a slightly different way from the sort of typical applications that you would think of when using a compressor on a guitar. The most classic compressed guitar sound that comes to mind right now is something like the Bird's Turn, 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 which is a 12-string through compression. And I'm not going to get into an in-depth look at what compression is and how it works, but suffice to say, compression makes the loud stuff a little quieter and the quiet stuff a little louder, so you end up with a more even sound. Just by way of example, I'm playing this Strat-style guitar into a Benson Dizzy Bird, and this is what this sounds like straight into the amp. So if I turned on a heap of compression, it would sound like this. In addition to hitting the amp a little harder with the output of the compressor, you can tell that things sustain a lot more, and the very front end of the note, the transient of the sound, is tamped down a little bit. So that's a typical compressor thing. You might have a really clean guitar that doesn't really sit or speak in a track that you're recording, and compression will help with that. What I typically use a compressor for in my music is both adding sustain and hitting the front end of an amp a little harder. So I'm not really running the compressor at unity gain, meaning it's not at the same level as the output of my guitar. I'm actually adding more output. And the reason is that I like to use a compressor to make volume pedal swells and single lines that I do with the volume pedal and delay hang around longer, kind of like a pedal steel, something like this. So what's happening is the compressor is before my volume pedal in the chain. So it's squishing my sound, kind of making all of the little nuances come out a lot more. I can play really light, and here's an example. I'll play really light without the compressor. And then here's something similar with the compressor. So it makes all of that really lightly picked stuff speak. And then I use the volume pedal to control the amount of signal that's going to the amp, and also therefore the amount of distortion that's happening. I can turn the volume pedal up a little bit. And it's fairly clean. I can turn the volume pedal all the way up and it'll be more distorted. But then I still have access to all of that nuancy stuff. So that's one use, using the compressor to create more sustain and accentuate the finger noises and nuances of what I'm doing, and then using the volume pedal to control how much is going to the amp. The other thing that I like to do with the compressor is sometimes you'll be playing in a situation where you can't be very loud, but you want to create the sensation of your amp compressing more, as if you were turning up the master on your amp and getting the power tubes and the transformers saturating, and it has a certain feel. It sort of chomps on the sound when you lay into it. And sometimes, if you're having to play quiet, you're playing with a singer-songwriter, you're in a coffee shop or something, or even just playing through a small amp in a recording, you can't really recreate that feel of the amp working so hard. But the compressor sort of does similar things to the sound. So without the compression, you might have this. With compression and a little bit of extra output, so you get a little more grab to the note, a little more saturation, and more sustain. The nuances come out a little bit more, and it feels a bit more like you're playing an amp that's giving up the goods. So you can also take this further by doing compression into some distortion. So more sustain, more harmonics, and all that kind of stuff. The downside is if you are squishing with the compressor and squishing with the distortion pedal and then squishing at the amp, you can end up with a sound that doesn't have any transient or attack, and it gets a little mushy. So you just have to be careful and choose your moments wisely with it. But for me, it's mostly a facilitator of the ambient sounds and bringing out those nuances in the playing, and then creating the feel of a louder amp if you aren't able to turn up. So that's my crash course in compression. I'm using the Diamond Comp SL right now. Previous to this, I owned the regular Diamond compressor, which is excellent, and before that, for a long time, I used the MXR Dynacomp, which is a very colored, very squishy sounding compressor, and it's cool for fitting some things into dense tracks. You can really get things to sit in just a certain way. So there's a ton of models out there on the market. I have not tried them all. I kind of landed on the Diamond and now the Comp SL and just stayed there. It works for me. It's fairly transparent sounding, but it still does the squishy, sustainy thing, and it can be very extreme if I want it to. So that's my spiel on compression. I hope this is helpful for you. As always, experiment fearlessly. Please let me know in the comments what's working for you, or if you have any other questions, feel free to email me at hello@danphelps.com. Subscribe to my YouTube, subscribe to get emails from me so we can stay in touch, and have a great day. Thank you so much.